The chandeliers glowed like fire above the white linen tables, casting golden light over crystal glasses and polished silverware. Laughter and the clinking of wine glasses filled the room, every corner echoing with the sound of money and privilege. But then, silence. All eyes turned to a young waiter standing frozen near the center of the room. His name was David. His hands gripped the serving tray so tightly his knuckles went pale. He wasn't trembling because the tray was heavy. He was trembling because of the men at table 6. They wore suits worth more than David made in a month. Their laughter was sharp, cruel, the kind meant to slice someone down. "Look at him," one of them smirked. "Think he even understands what we're saying?" Another leaned back in his chair, eyes glinting with arrogance. "Bet he can't even speak English right. Probably just learned enough to carry plates." The table erupted in laughter. It was loud, ugly, the kind of laughter that makes everyone else in the room pretend not to notice. David's throat tightened. For years, he had swallowed moments like this, insults hidden as jokes, sneers disguised as banter. But tonight felt different. Tonight, something in him stirred, and when he finally opened his mouth, the entire restaurant went silent. The silence in the restaurant was sharp enough to cut through glass. Forks hovered mid-air, conversations died, and even the violinist in the corner faltered, bow suspended. David's chest rose and fell as he set the tray down on the nearest table. He wasn't supposed to speak. A waiter was meant to serve and disappear like a ghost weaving between tables. But tonight was different. "I understand every word you just said." David's voice rang clear, steady, though his palms were slick with sweat. "And I've understood every word like it for the past 2 years I've worked here." The men at table 6 blinked, surprised. Their leader, Victor Moretti, a real estate mogul whose face had graced more than a few business magazines, arched a brow, then smirked. "Well," Victor drawled, swirling the red wine in his glass, "the boy speaks." "Bravo!" The other men chuckled, relieved the moment hadn't slipped into anything too uncomfortable. They leaned back in their chairs, expecting David to shrink again. But he didn't. David's voice gained strength, drawn from some well inside him he hadn't touched in years. "You think you're powerful because you sit here in silk suits, because you throw around tips that you know mean more to me than they do to you. But power isn't about money. It's about what happens when the lights go out, when no one's watching." Gasps rippled across the restaurant. Victor's smirk vanished. His eyes narrowed, predatory. He leaned forward. "Careful, kid, you're playing with fire." David swallowed hard. He was playing with fire. Every nerve in his body screamed to step back, apologize, retreat into invisibility. But something in his chest, anger, exhaustion, pride, kept him rooted. "This city," David continued, his voice shaking but loud enough to carry, "is built on people like me, on workers you insult, ignore, and discard. And one day, you'll realize we've been listening, watching, waiting." The last word echoed. The chandeliers flickered as if the room itself had inhaled. Victor leaned back slowly, lips curling into a thin smile. "Interesting speech," he said, his tone laced with menace. "But you're still nothing more than a waiter. Remember that." David's heart hammered in his chest. He wanted to say more, but a hand on his arm stopped him. It was Maria, the restaurant manager, her face pale but her grip strong. "David," she whispered urgently, "in the kitchen, now." He hesitated. The whole restaurant was staring. Some diners looked shocked, others impressed. A few even smiled like they'd just witnessed something heroic. But Maria's eyes were wide with fear. David nodded stiffly and followed her out. The kitchen doors swung shut behind him, cutting off the tension of the dining room. Pots clattered, chefs shouted orders, but David barely heard them. He pressed his palms against the stainless steel counter, trying to steady his breath. "Are you insane?" Maria hissed, dragging him to the side. That was Victor Moretti. Do you have any idea who you just humiliated? David met her gaze. Yeah, and I'm not sorry. She stared at him like he'd lost his mind. He owns half this city. If he decides he wants you gone, you're gone. Not just from here, from everywhere. People like him, they don't forgive. David's throat tightened. He knew she was right. But something about Victor's smug face, his cruel laugh, it had cracked something open inside David, something that wouldn't close again. Maria lowered her voice. Listen to me. Go back out there. Apologize. Tell him you lost your temper, whatever it takes. Maybe he'll let this slide. But David shook his head. Number, if I apologize, he wins. And men like him don't need any more victories. Maria stared at him, torn between fear and admiration. Then God help you, she muttered. Later that night, after his shift ended, David walked home through the quiet streets. The city lights flickered on puddles from an earlier rain. His shoes were soaked. His uniform smelled of wine and grease, but his head was still buzzing. He replayed every word, every look, every second of silence after his speech. He knew he'd crossed a line. He knew Victor wouldn't forget. But part of him, deep down, felt alive for the first time in years. And then, just as he turned the corner toward his apartment, he saw it. A sleek black car parked across the street. Windows tinted, engine humming low. David slowed, his stomach dropping. The car door opened. A man in a dark suit stepped out, eyes locked on him. David Miller? The man asked. His voice was calm. Too calm. David froze. Yeah? The man reached into his coat, not for a gun, but for an envelope. He extended it. Mr. Moretti would like a word. David stared at the envelope. His pulse thundered in his ears. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The night after the dinner still echoed in Michael's head. He lay in his small apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling fan that hummed weakly above. The billionaire's laughter, the woman's curious gaze, the silence that followed his words in Chinese. It all replayed like a reel he couldn't stop. He had only meant to defuse the awkwardness. A simple phrase in Mandarin, delivered with confidence. But the weight of it, of revealing a skill he had kept hidden, shifted something in the air. By the next evening, the whispers had already begun. Hey, did you hear? The waiter speaks Chinese. Fluent, muttered one busboy to another. No way. He probably just memorized a sentence or two. You didn't hear it, man. It was perfect. I swear the billionaire almost spilled his wine. Michael pretended not to notice. He tied his apron tighter, polished glasses, checked the table settings. Routine. But under the surface, a storm churned. That night, when the billionaire returned with his entourage, Michael felt the shift immediately. The room stilled. Waiters glanced at him, some curious, some jealous. And then it happened again. The man raised his glass and spoke, low and deliberate, in Mandarin. A question. A test. Michael froze. His heart pounded. But then he answered. Fluent, steady, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The billionaire smiled, impressed. The woman tilted her head, eyes sharper this time, assessing him with intent. The room buzzed again. From that night on, the whispers turned into stories. Some said Michael was a spy. Others swore he had a secret past, maybe a rich family that abandoned him. A few even suggested he was plotting something, some grand scheme that no one could yet see. Michael ignored it all, but the truth was harder. His Chinese wasn't just a parlor trick. It was the key to a life he thought he'd buried years ago. The desert always carried secrets well. On his nights off, Michael drove out past the neon lights of Las Vegas, past the casinos and the chaos, into the barren stretches of sand and silence. He would park his old car by the roadside, step out, and let the desert wind cut through the stillness. It reminded him of the years he had lived abroad, of nights spent in Beijing, in small apartments above crowded noodle shops, of hushed conversations in tea houses where secrets traded hands like currency. He had gone there as a student, chasing opportunity. But he left carrying something else, something heavier. Now, standing in the desert, Michael whispered to the stars in Chinese, words of regret, of promises unkept. He thought no one could hear. But the desert had a way of carrying whispers farther than one expected. The billionaire, Mr. Zhang, was not a man to let curiosity die. A week later, he summoned Michael privately. "You," Zhang said, his English thick but clear, "you are wasted here." Michael stood stiff, unsure how to respond. "You hide," Zhang continued, tapping his glass with a finger. "But people who hide always have reasons. What are yours?" Michael said nothing. Silence was safer, but Zhang leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Be careful. Whispers in this city travel fast. Some fall on ears you do not want." Michael felt a chill. For a moment he thought Zhang knew about Beijing, knew about what he had done, or what he had run from. He forced a polite smile. "I'm just a waiter, sir." Zhang didn't believe him. Michael could see it in his eyes. The next day, the whispers grew sharper. "Did you hear? The billionaire asked for him personally." "Yeah, he's in. You don't get invited in unless there's something big." Michael's co-workers eyed him differently now, some with envy, some with suspicion. One, a young server named Carla, pulled him aside. "Michael, what's going on? People are saying things." He wanted to brush it off, but something in her tone stopped him. She wasn't just curious, she was worried. "It's nothing," he said finally. "Just old ghosts. They never stay buried." Carla frowned. "Ghosts don't scare me. People do. Just be careful, okay?" Michael nodded, but he knew it was already too late. That night, the desert seemed louder. The wind carried echoes, voices he thought he'd forgotten. In his dreams, he saw the faces again, the men from Beijing, the choices he'd made, the betrayal that had forced him to flee. When he woke, drenched in sweat, one thought pressed against his skull like a blade. If John kept digging, the past wouldn't just whisper, it would scream. The desert holds secrets, but secrets, like sand, slip through fingers when held too long. And someone, Michael didn't yet know who, was already reaching for his. The desert doesn't forgive. It remembers. Every footprint, every whisper, every deal made under its endless sky seems to linger in the dry air long after the people are gone. Michael knew this better than most. By day, he moved through the hotel like a shadow, pouring drinks, clearing plates, bowing politely. But at night, when the neon glow of the strip faded in his rearview mirror, he returned to the desert, as if compelled by some invisible tether. Out there, he wasn't a waiter. He wasn't the man who spoke fluent Mandarin and drew the curiosity of billionaires. He was just Michael, alone, restless, haunted. One evening, beneath a bruised purple sky, he parked his car farther than usual, near an abandoned construction site where sand had already begun to swallow rusting beams and concrete slabs. The air smelled of dust and metal. He sat on the hood, cigarette in hand, staring at the horizon until his thoughts dissolved into the silence. But silence never lasted long. "Beautiful night," a voice said. Michael jolted. A man emerged from the shadows, his figure lean, his suit too fine for the desert. His shoes crunched against the sand, deliberate, unhurried. Michael's pulse spiked. Few people stumbled out here by accident. "Don't worry," the man said smoothly, switching from English to Mandarin. "I'm a friend." Michael froze. The accent was Beijing, the words precise, practiced. The stranger smiled, his teeth glinting in the moonlight. "Mr. Zhang speaks highly of you, says you've been hiding talent. He's curious. Michael forced his face to remain neutral, but inside panic surged. If Zhang had sent this man, it meant the billionaire wasn't just curious. He was probing, testing. "I don't know what you're talking about," Michael said in English, voice flat. The man chuckled softly. "Ah, still playing the game. But you should know, the desert doesn't keep secrets forever, and neither does Beijing." With that, the stranger lit a cigarette, dropped the match into the sand, and walked away, disappearing into the dunes as if he'd never been there. Michael stood rooted, the smoke from his own cigarette burning his lungs. His mind reeled. Beijing. It wasn't just a word. It was a wound. Years ago, he had gone there as a student, chasing opportunity. Language, business, connection. He had absorbed it all like a sponge. But what he found in Beijing wasn't just culture. It was a labyrinth, a network of people who traded favors like currency, who smiled as they slid knives into each other's backs. Michael had been young, ambitious, naive. He fell in with the wrong circle, a group that promised influence, wealth, a future. At first it was harmless, translating documents, running errands. But then the errands turned darker. Information exchanged in dimly lit rooms, meetings where every word carried risk. And then came the choice, a choice that changed everything. Michael betrayed someone. Or maybe, he told himself, he only survived. The memory was a blur of shouting, fists slamming on tables, a name he should never have spoken out loud. By the time the dust settled, he was on a plane back to the United States, carrying nothing but a suitcase and a gnawing fear that one day the past would follow. Now, standing in the Nevada desert, he realized it already had. Back at the hotel, things grew stranger. Mr. Zhang's visits became more frequent. Each time he asked for Michael. Each time their conversations dipped further into Mandarin, touching on history, philosophy, even veiled questions about Beijing. "Do you miss it?" Zhang asked one evening, swirling his wine. Michael hesitated. "Sometimes." "You left quickly. People remember things like that." Michael's throat went dry. "I was just a student." Zhang's eyes glimmered with amusement. "No one is ever just a student." It wasn't a threat. Not yet. But it was close enough. The whispers in the hotel grew louder. Carla, the young server, caught him in the staff hallway one night. "Michael, people are saying you're involved with Zhang, that he's recruiting you. Is it true?" He shook his head. "It's nothing." She frowned, unconvinced. "Nothing doesn't look at you like that. Nothing doesn't send men to watch you in the parking lot." Michael stiffened. "What did you say?" Carla lowered her voice. "Don't pretend you don't notice. 2 men, suits. They wait for you after shift near the back exit. Not from the casino, not security. They're his." Michael felt the world tilt. He had seen shadows before, but dismissed them as paranoia. Now he knew better. The desert wasn't the only place carrying whispers. They had seeped into the city, into the very walls of the hotel. That night, he didn't drive to the desert. He went home, locked the door, pulled the blinds tight. He poured whiskey into a chipped glass and stared at his reflection in the dark window. Secrets don't die. They only bury themselves in sand until someone digs them up. And Zhang was digging. The question wasn't whether Michael's past would resurface. The question was, when it did, whose hands would be holding the shovel? The desert wind howled outside, carrying dust across the horizon. Somewhere out there, the stranger who spoke of Beijing was waiting. Somewhere, Zhang was smiling, calculating. And Michael, once a student, once a traitor, now a man caught between 2 lives, knew the sand beneath his feet was shifting. Soon it would swallow him whole. The banquet hall glistened with crystal chandeliers, laughter, and the low hum of expensive conversations. Plates of lobster and truffle pasta floated past on silver trays, but at the center of the storm was a silence so sharp it could slice through the air. Everyone had gone quiet after the waiter, the black waiter they mocked minutes ago, spoke flawless Mandarin to the Chinese billionaire, Mr. Li Zheng. The billionaire hadn't stopped smiling since. His sharp eyes studied Marcus as if he had just discovered a hidden diamond. "Impressive," Li said in English, his accent crisp. "Not just pronunciation, intonation. Perfect. Where did you learn?" Marcus stood straight, hands folded, voice calm but steady. "Beijing, Tsinghua University, scholarship program." A collective gasp fluttered through the tables. The same executives who had sneered now leaned forward. Whispers spread like fire. A waiter at a luxury banquet, but trained in one of China's top universities? Mr. Li chuckled. "And yet, you are here? Serving drinks?" That was the question everyone wanted to ask. Marcus hesitated. He could have shrugged it off, but deep down he felt the sting. His eyes shifted to a corner of the room, where a man in a navy suit sat smugly, sipping wine, Mr. Carter, the banquet's host, and the man who had once been Marcus's mentor. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Life is not always what it seems," he said quietly. Li tilted his head, intrigued. "Good answer." He gestured to the empty seat beside him. "Come, sit." The room stirred. A waiter being invited to sit with a billionaire? Unthinkable. Mr. Carter's smile faltered. Marcus removed his apron slowly, placed it on the service table, and walked over. Each step was heavy with silent rebellion. He sat down, and for the first time in years, he wasn't a servant. He was an equal at the table. Li poured Marcus a glass of wine himself, an act that scandalized the crowd. Then he leaned closer. "You know," Li said softly, "this room is full of men who think they can play me. They flatter, they offer deals, they pretend to respect me, but you—" He tapped the table lightly. "You broke the mask." Marcus remained quiet. "I admire that," Li continued. "Tell me, Marcus, do you like games?" Marcus frowned. "What kind of games?" Li's smile deepened. "The kind where truth and lies are cards on the table. The kind where only one walks away a winner." It wasn't a question. It was a challenge. The billionaire clapped his hands once. The servers paused, waiting. Li gestured, and a small wooden box was brought out. Inside were carved ivory tiles, mahjong pieces, but Marcus realized this wasn't just for show. Li was setting the stage. "You and I," Li said, "will play. Not mahjong, not poker. A game of words. You answer with honesty, or you lose. You lie, I'll know. And if I win, you must reveal why a man of your education wears that apron." Marcus's throat went dry. The entire room now leaned closer, their greed for drama outweighing their food. Carter's smirk returned. He wanted Marcus humiliated. "And if I win?" Marcus asked. Li's eyes gleamed. "Then you earn a place at my table. Permanently." Li leaned back, his voice sharp. "Why did you really leave Beijing?" Marcus inhaled. Memories came rushing. The lectures, the friendships, the woman he once loved, and the betrayal. He chose his words carefully. "I didn't leave. I was pushed." Gasps. Li tilted his head. "By whom?" Marcus's eyes flicked to Carter. The smug man shifted in his seat, but Marcus didn't speak the name. Not yet. Li smiled knowingly. "Interesting. You answer, but you don't reveal. Clever. Next." Li fired question after question. "Who do you trust most in this room?" Marcus answered. "No one." "Do you regret coming here tonight?" Marcus. "Not anymore." "Do you fear me?" Marcus held Li's gaze. "Number one, I fear wasting my potential more than I fear any man." Each answer landed like a hammer, shaking the audience. Even those who mocked him now looked impressed. But then Li leaned forward, eyes sharper than knives. "Final question. One move decides the game. Why did you put on that apron and serve these people who laugh at you? The room froze. Marcus's chest tightened. He remembered nights of hunger, debts, his mother's failing health, the betrayal that left him jobless. But he also remembered something else. His plan. He met Lee's gaze. Because sometimes, to win, you must first sit at the table no one respects. Tonight, I'm not the waiter. Tonight, I've shown them who I really am. Silence. Then Li Jiang burst into laughter, loud and genuine. He clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Bravo!" Li shouted. "You didn't just play the game, you beat it!" The room erupted in whispers again, but the power dynamic had shifted. Marcus was no longer background. He was center stage. Li turned to Carter. "You trained him, didn't you? And then you buried him. Foolish." Carter's face turned pale. Li raised his glass toward Marcus. "From this moment forward, you will work with me. Not under me, with me. The waiter becomes the player." Marcus exhaled slowly. For years, he had carried silence like a chain. Tonight, the chain had snapped, but deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning, because billionaires never play games without stakes, and Marcus had just stepped onto a board much larger and more dangerous than he imagined. The ballroom glittered under chandeliers, but David couldn't shake the heaviness in his chest. The whispers from the night before still echoed in his mind. He knows who you are. Who was he? The billionaire, Mr. Jiang, had smiled too knowingly, too smoothly. David adjusted his waiter's jacket, his hands damp with sweat. Every tray he carried felt heavier than usual, and every laugh from the wealthy guests sounded like it was directed at him. But then he saw her again. Anna. Her eyes caught his from across the room, calm, steady, but filled with something more. Warning. She approached, her silver gown brushing the polished floor. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't look so tense. They're watching." "Who?" David asked, his jaw tight. Anna's lips barely moved. "Everyone who's smiling." The music swelled, violins competing with the hum of conversation. But beneath the harmony was an invisible current of tension. David felt it pressing against his ribs, stealing his breath. Mr. Jiang, standing near the stage, raised his glass. "To partnerships that last, and to masks that protect us." His words lingered like smoke. A toast, yes, but also a message. David's stomach clenched. He knew then, Zhang wasn't simply here for business, he was here for a game. Later that night, when the crowd thinned, Anna slipped a note into David's hand as if handing him a folded napkin. Her eyes didn't meet his. He unfolded it in the pantry. Just 4 words, written in sharp, fast strokes. "Meet me. Midnight. Garden." The garden stretched behind the hotel like a hidden world. Lanterns flickering, shadows bending against the trimmed hedges. David found her near the fountain. She wasn't alone. An older man leaned against the stone rail, his posture rigid, his eyes sharp as glass. His suit was immaculate, but his hands were scarred, like someone who had worked with machines or weapons. "This is Elias," Anna said. "He knows more than anyone else." Elias's voice was gravel. "Mr. Jiang isn't what he seems. He plays at being the charming benefactor, but every move he makes has strings attached." David frowned. "Why me? Why drag me into this?" Elias studied him for a long moment. "Because you're not just a waiter." The words hit like a punch. David froze. "What do you mean?" Anna's gaze softened. "He knows, David. About your father. About why you really came here." David's pulse roared in his ears. His father, his shadow, his burden, his secret. How could they know? He had buried that past so deeply it should have been unreachable. Elias stepped closer. "Zhang thrives on secrets. He collects them like currency. But yours, Yours might be the most valuable of all." The night air grew colder. Somewhere inside the hotel, a violin still played, faint and haunting. David felt his legs weaken. "So, what am I supposed to do? Play along? Pretend I'm still just the help?" Anna's hand brushed his, grounding him. "Number, you stand your ground, because if you don't, he'll own you." The next evening, the private dinner began. A smaller, more exclusive circle gathered in a room where gold-lined walls trapped every word. David wasn't supposed to be there, but Anna made sure he was. The table was long, covered in crystal and silverware that sparkled like weapons. Mr. Zhang sat at the head, his smile polished, his eyes unreadable. And then he spoke directly to David. "So," Zhang said, swirling his wine, "tell me, does serving the powerful teach you humility or resentment?" The room hushed. Everyone turned. David swallowed hard, every muscle in his body screaming to stay still. But he heard Anna's words in his head. "Stand your ground." He looked Zhang in the eye. "It teaches me patience, and patience teaches strength." A silence hung, sharp as glass. Then Zhang laughed. A deep, rolling laugh that made everyone else laugh too, though uneasily. "Well said. Patience is indeed strength." But beneath his smile, David saw something shift. A flicker of recognition, of calculation. After the dinner, Zhang approached him privately. The corridor was dim, shadows stretching like claws. "You remind me of someone," Zhang said softly. "A man who once stood where you stand now. He, too, thought patience was strength." David's breath hitched. He didn't dare ask, but he knew. Zhang leaned closer, his whisper cut like a blade. "Your father—" David's knees nearly gave out. The world spun. He forced himself to stay upright, but his heart pounded so hard he thought it might give him away. Zhang's smile widened. "Ah, I see I struck the chord, don't worry. I won't expose you. Yet. But secrets have a way of costing." And with that he walked away, his footsteps echoing like a clock ticking down. Anna found David later, his hands shaking, his face pale. "He knows," David said, his voice cracking. "He knows everything." Anna's jaw tightened. "Then the mask is off. For both of you." Elias appeared from the shadows, his expression grim. "This is no longer about survival, it's about war. And in war, David, truth is the sharpest weapon." The night stretched deep and merciless. David realized the game had changed. The billionaire wasn't just testing him, he was hunting him. And if David didn't fight back, everything he had hidden, his father's legacy, his own fragile chance at redemption, would be destroyed. Beneath the chandeliers, beneath the smiles, beneath the masks, the real battle had begun. The courtroom was packed. Reporters crammed into the benches, their cameras flashing, pens scratching furiously against notepads. The air buzzed with anticipation. Everyone had come for one reason: the scandal of the century. At the center of it all sat Derek, the black waiter who had been mocked, humiliated, and underestimated. But today, he wasn't just a waiter. He was a witness, and maybe, just maybe, the key to unraveling a billionaire's carefully woven web of lies. Across from him sat Mr. Zhang Wei, the Chinese billionaire whose empire stretched across continents. He was dressed immaculately, his silver cufflinks gleaming. His calm face betrayed nothing, but his eyes, sharp, predatory, never left Derek. Beside him, his American attorney, Charles Whitman, whispered strategy. On the opposite table sat Elena Torres, the fiery lawyer representing Derek and the three young workers who had dared to expose Zhang's exploitation. Judge Hammond, an old man with a gravelly voice, slammed the gavel. "Court is in session. Prosecution, proceed." Elena rose, heels clicking against the marble floor. Her voice was steady, but her words cut like a blade. "Your Honor, Today we present evidence that Mr. Jiang Wei has engaged in a systematic practice of labor exploitation, wage theft, and corruption. But more than that, today we show you who he really is. Gasps rippled through the room. Elena turned toward Derek, seated at the witness stand. "Mr. Derek Cole, please tell the court what you witnessed the night of the gala." Derek took a breath. The memory was still sharp. The laughter, the mocking voices, the sting of humiliation, followed by the moment he turned the room upside down by speaking fluent Mandarin. "At first they laughed at me," Derek said, his voice firm. "They saw a waiter, just a waiter. But what they didn't know was that I understood every word Mr. Jiang said." The room leaned forward. He continued, his tone sharper now. He wasn't talking about business deals. He wasn't joking. He was threatening. He told one of his partners that anyone who leaked documents about the offshore accounts would vanish in the desert like sand. Those were his exact words. Murmurs filled the courtroom. Judge Hammond banged the gavel. "Order!" Charles Whitman shot up from his seat. "Objection, hearsay. My client never made such threats. This is a fabrication." But Elena was ready. She lifted a USB drive. "Your Honor, we have a recording, captured by one of the workers who was too afraid to come forward until now." Gasps exploded again. The judge nodded. "Play it." The courtroom went silent. A shaky recording filled the air. Jiang's voice, low and cold. "They think they can expose me? Fools, I will bury them in the sand. No one crosses me and survives." The impact was immediate. Jiang's calm mask cracked for just a moment, his jaw tightening. But Charles wasn't finished. He stood, his voice booming. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is nothing but a trick, an edited recording designed to smear a respected businessman. My client has built schools, funded charities, saved lives, and you dare reduce him to some criminal?" His words carried power, and some jurors shifted uneasily. For a moment, doubt entered the room. But then Derek did something no one expected. He switched languages. His voice slipped into flawless Mandarin, then Cantonese, before returning to English. "What he said in Chinese doesn't translate the same in English. I know because I've lived there. I studied there. I worked in factories like the ones he owns. I saw children with hands bleeding from sewing, old men collapsing from heat." Jiang smiled while collecting their money. The jurors stared. Jiang's eyes burned with rage, but he stayed silent. Then came the twist. Elena called a surprise witness. Mei Lin, Jiang's former assistant. Small, nervous, her hands trembled as she took the stand. "I worked for Mr. Jiang for 10 years, she whispered. "I stayed silent because I was afraid, but I kept records. Every offshore transfer, every bribe, every disappearance." Gasps again. Elena approached gently. "And why are you coming forward now?" Mei Lin's eyes flicked to Derek. "Because he reminded me of something I forgot. That silence is its own prison." Charles tried to discredit her, calling her a disgruntled employee. But then Elena dropped the hammer. A thick stack of documents, signed by Jiang himself. The courtroom tilted. The prosecution's castle began to crumble. By the end of the day, the jury wasn't looking at a polished billionaire anymore. They were looking at a predator in a suit. Judge Hammond's gravelly voice echoed. "This trial is far from over, but let the record show the shadows have begun to lift." The gavel slammed. The trial adjourned. But outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed Derek. Questions flew. "How does it feel to stand against a billionaire? Do you think you'll win? Are you afraid?" Derek paused. His eyes, tired but unbroken, stared into the sea of flashing lights. "I'm not afraid of shadows," he said quietly, "because shadows only exist where there is light." The crowd erupted. The story wasn't over, but a war had just begun. The trial ended, but the city didn't return to silence. If anything, the noise only grew louder. News outlets plastered Leon's name across headlines, labeling him the waiter who humbled billionaires. Social media flooded with clips of him speaking flawless Chinese, dissecting contracts like a seasoned lawyer, standing tall against giants who once laughed at him. To the public, Leon had become a symbol, proof that dignity could pierce arrogance. But symbols are heavy things to carry. At the small diner where it all began, Leon stood in front of the mirror in his waiter's uniform. The same worn apron, the same cracked tiles underfoot, the same smell of coffee and grease clinging to the air. Yet he felt different, like the man in the mirror no longer belonged here. Mary, wiping down a table nearby, caught his look. "You're not really coming back, are you?" she asked softly. He turned, half smiling, half torn. "I don't know what I'm coming back to, or what I'm leaving behind." Outside, a black car waited. The door opened, and a voice spoke in smooth Mandarin. "Mr. Leon, he's expecting you." Leon froze. He. The word lingered. He hadn't seen Victor since the trial's final day, when the billionaire left the courthouse without a word, without so much as a glance back. Rumors swirled. Victor had lost his empire, fled the country, vanished into shadow. But now, here was a car, an invitation. Mary's eyes widened. "You're not seriously thinking of going with them?" Leon tightened his apron strings, then slowly untied them, laying the fabric on the counter. "I need to know why, Mary. Why he pushed me. Why he chose me. Why he never stopped testing me. Maybe," his voice faltered, "maybe it was never about the money." The car ride stretched into silence. The city lights blurred past, then gave way to dark roads, desert sand, and eventually a gated villa glimmering beneath the stars. The driver stopped, opening the door. "He's inside." Leon stepped into the villa. It was quiet. Too quiet. A faint echo of water trickling through an indoor fountain was the only sound. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood and old books. On the table in the center of the grand hall lay a single envelope, sealed with red wax. Leon reached for it, hands trembling. The seal bore a symbol he recognized instantly, the same strange mark carved inside that cactus lump he had cut open months ago. He tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in bold strokes of Chinese calligraphy. He read aloud, voice cracking as the words filled the room. "The real trial has only just begun. The world sees masks. You, Leon, will see faces. Choose carefully, friend or foe, savior or destroyer. When the desert calls again, will you answer?" The lights flickered. A shadow moved across the balcony above. Leon's heart pounded as he whispered into the emptiness. "Victor?" No answer, only the sound of the fountain, dripping endlessly, echoing like whispers in the sand. And then, the faintest sound of laughter, the same laughter that had once mocked him, now softer, darker, and closer than ever.